Jake Martinez walked through the long hallway of the Galactic Academy. The walls were made of a strange blue metal that seemed to glow softly. Through the big windows, he could see stars everywhere. This was not like any school back on Earth. Jake was 20 years old and came from Texas. He was the first human student to study at this famous school. The school was built on a giant space station that moved around a planet called Kepler 442b. Students from all over the galaxy came here to learn. Jake carried his books in a simple bag. He wore normal clothes, jeans, and a blue shirt. All the other students looked very different from him. Some were tall and blue with long arms. Others looked like big insects with many eyes. Some were made of what looked like living crystal that changed colors. He reached his classroom and looked at the sign on the door. It said, Xenobiology 301 in many different languages. Jake could read the English part at the bottom. He took a deep breath and walked inside. The classroom was huge. The ceiling was very high and curved like the inside of a ball. There were no regular desks. Instead, there were floating seats that could move up and down. Each seat was different to fit different types of students. Jake found an empty seat in the back row. As he sat down, the seat changed shape to fit his human body. It was comfortable, but felt strange. He looked around at his classmates. There was Valinara, a tall blue alien with 4 arms. She was from a planet called Altair Prime. Her skin was smooth, and her eyes were large and purple. She was always very quiet and polite. Next to her sat Crixton, who looked like a giant mantis. His body was green, and he had 6 legs. His head could turn all the way around. He was from a world where everyone lived in big tree cities. Crixton was very smart, but got nervous easily. Near the front of the class was Zixtel. She was made of living crystal that looked like diamonds. Different colors of light moved through her body when she talked. Her people did not speak with words. They talked by changing the colors of their light. A small machine on her desk changed her light talk into words that others could understand. There were many other students, too. Some breathed different air and had to wear special masks. Others were so small they sat on tiny floating platforms. A few were so big they had to stay near the back so they would not block the view. Jake felt lonely sometimes. He was the only human in the whole school. The other students were nice to him, but they did not understand many things about humans. They thought humans were weak because they had no claws, no hard shells, and no poison. They also thought humans came from a safe, easy world. The teacher walked into the room. Professor Kethver was an Exilian. He had 6 arms and skin that was dark red. His head was bigger than a human head, and he had 4 eyes. 2 eyes were on the front of his head, and 2 were on the sides. This way he could see in all directions. Professor Kethver had taught at the academy for many years. He knew more about alien animals than almost anyone in the galaxy. He had visited hundreds of worlds and studied thousands of different creatures. Good morning, class, Professor Kethver said. His voice came from a small machine on his chest because his mouth could not make sounds that other species could understand. Today we will learn about apex predators, the professor continued. These are the most dangerous hunters on each world. They are the animals that other animals fear most. The students became very quiet. Even talking about dangerous animals made many of them nervous. Jake noticed that some of his classmates moved their seats a little further apart, as if they were getting ready to run away. Professor Kethver walked to the center of the room. He pressed a button on a small device in one of his hands. Suddenly, the air above them began to glow. A 3-dimensional picture appeared floating in the space above their heads. This is a hologram, the professor explained. It will show us real animals from many different worlds. Some of these creatures are very frightening. If anyone needs to leave the room, that is okay. Jake looked around and saw that several students were already looking toward the door. Velinara had wrapped her 4 arms around herself. Crixton was making small clicking sounds, which meant he was worried. "We will start with creatures from worlds that are far from here," Professor Kethver said. "Then we will look at animals from worlds that are closer to the Academy." The hologram changed to show a dark, foggy place. It looked like a swamp, but the water was not brown. It was bright green and seemed to glow. "This is the planet Mordok 7, the professor said. "The water here is not water like we know. It is liquid methane. It is very cold and very dangerous. For most life forms, something moved in the green liquid. It was huge and had many long arms like octopus. But this creature was much bigger than any octopus Jake had ever seen. It was as big as a house. Its arms were covered in sharp spikes, and its eyes were like red lights in the darkness. The creature grabbed a smaller animal that was swimming by. The smaller animal was still bigger than a car. The predator crushed it easily with its powerful arms. Many students gasped in fear. 2 of the smaller students actually fell out of their floating seats. Velinara made a sound like a whistle, which meant she was scared. Her purple eyes were wide open. "This is the Mordok Strangler," Professor Kethver explained. "It is the apex predator of its world. Nothing else in those methane seas can fight it and win." Jake watched the hologram with interest. The creature was certainly big and looked dangerous, but it moved slowly and seemed to just wait for food to come to it. It reminded him of the alligators he had seen in Louisiana, except much bigger. The hologram changed again. Now it showed a world covered in tall, crystal trees. The trees were many colors: red, blue, gold, and green. They were beautiful, but also sharp-looking. "This is Andromeda's Prime," the professor said. "The trees here are made of living crystal. They grow very tall and very sharp. Running between the crystal trees were animals that looked like wolves. But these wolves were much bigger than earth wolves. They had silver fur, and their eyes glowed blue. Their teeth were like metal knives. Pack of crystal wolves was chasing another animal. The animal they were chasing looked like a deer, but was purple and had 6 legs. The wolves were much faster. They surrounded the deer-like animal and attacked it together. More students left the classroom. The ones who stayed moved their seats closer to the walls. Some had activated personal force fields that made them glow with protective light. Jake found these animals interesting, but not really scary. They were just doing what predators do, hunting for food to survive. He had seen similar things in nature documentaries. Back on Earth, the class continued for another hour. Professor Kethver showed them dangerous animals from many worlds. There were flying creatures with poisonous stings, underground hunters with massive claws, and sea monsters with hundreds of sharp teeth. With each new creature, more students became frightened. By the end of the class, Jake was one of only a few students who seemed calm. As the other students hurried out of the classroom, Jake stayed behind. He was curious about what they would learn next time. He had no idea that the next class would change everything his classmates thought they knew about humans and Earth. 3 days later, Jake walked into the same classroom. There were fewer students today. Some had dropped the class after seeing the scary predators from the last lesson. The students who remained looked nervous. Jake took his usual seat in the back row. He noticed that the other students had moved their seats even further apart. Velinara was sitting near the door, ready to run if needed. Crixton was clicking softly to himself, a sign that he was worried. Professor Kethver entered the room carrying a small device. His 4 eyes looked around at the remaining students. He seemed a little sad that so many had left his class. "Today we will continue studying apex predators," the professor announced. We will look at creatures from different types of worlds. Some worlds are very hot, some are very cold, and some have strange atmospheres. The hologram appeared above them again. This time it showed a world covered in ice and snow. The sky was dark and full of storms. This is HFY Stor, Professor Kethver explained. It is always winter here. The temperature is so cold that most species cannot survive. In the hologram, a huge white creature was walking across the ice. It looked like a bear, but was much bigger. It had long claws and teeth like swords. Its fur was thick and covered in ice crystals. This is the HFY hunter, the professor said. It is perfectly adapted to survive in the cold. Its claws can break through ice that is 10 feet thick. The ice bear found a hole in the frozen ground. It reached down with its massive paw and pulled out a creature that looked like a seal. The seal creature was as big as a car, but the ice bear held it easily. Zixtal's crystal body flashed with rapid red light. This meant she was very scared. Her translation device made worried beeping sounds. The HFY hunter has no natural enemies, Professor Kethver continued. It fears nothing on its world. The hologram changed again. Now it showed a jungle world with huge trees and thick vines. The air looked hot and humid. Steam rose from the ground. This is the jungle planet Verdania, the professor said. The plants here grow very fast and very large. Many dangerous creatures live in these jungles. Something moved in the trees. It was long and thick like a snake, but it was bigger than any snake Jake had ever imagined. The creature was as wide as a train car and seemed to go on forever through the trees. The jungle snake dropped down from the trees onto a large animal below. The animal looked like an elephant, but had armor on its back. The snake wrapped around the armored elephant and squeezed. The elephant tried to fight, but could not escape. More students left the classroom. Only 12 remained out of the original 30. Professor Kethver looked at his device and pressed several buttons. Now we will look at creatures from a world that is closer to our galaxy. This world is called Earth. Jake sat up straighter in his seat. This was his home world. He was curious to see what his teacher would show about Earth's animals. The hologram changed to show a blue ocean under a bright sun. The water was clear and beautiful. Fish swam peacefully in the warm water. Earth is a water world, Professor Kethver explained. Much of its surface is covered by oceans. These oceans contain many life forms. Suddenly, something huge moved in the water. It was gray and white with a pointed nose. Its mouth was filled with rows of sharp, triangular teeth. The creature was as big as a small spaceship. This is called a great white shark, the professor said. It is the apex predator of Earth's oceans. The shark moved through the water with incredible speed. It attacked a seal that was swimming near the surface. The shark's jaws opened wide, showing all of its terrible teeth. It caught the seal in one bite. The remaining students screamed. Valinara fainted and fell off her floating seat. Crixton made loud clicking sounds and tried to hide under his desk. Zixtal's crystal body flashed with bright white light, which meant she was terrified. 3 more students ran out of the classroom. The ones who stayed were shaking with fear. Jake watched his classmates with surprise. The great white shark was certainly a powerful predator, but it was just a fish. It was not as big as some of the creatures they had seen from other worlds. The great white shark can smell blood from miles away, Professor Kethver continued. Its bite is strong enough to cut through metal. The hologram changed to show a grassland with tall golden grass. The sun was setting, and the sky was orange and red. It looked peaceful and beautiful. This is an African savanna on Earth, the professor said. Many large animals live here. A group of large golden cats appeared in the grass. They had thick manes around their necks and powerful muscles. Their eyes were bright yellow and focused on something in the distance. "These are called lions," Professor Kethfer explained. "They are pack hunters. They work together to catch their prey." The lions moved silently through the grass. They were hunting a large animal that looked like a horse with black and white stripes. The striped animal was eating grass and did not see the danger. The lions attacked together. They were fast and strong. The striped animal tried to run, but could not escape. The lions brought it down with their sharp claws and teeth. More students left the room. Only 8 remained now. The ones who stayed were holding on to their seats tightly. Jake thought the lions were beautiful animals. He had seen them many times at the zoo back home. They were impressive hunters, but they were not monsters. The hologram changed again. This time it showed a cold forest with tall trees and snow on the ground. A river ran through the forest, making peaceful sounds. "This is a forest in North America on Earth," the professor said. "It looks calm, but it contains one of the most dangerous predators on the planet." Something large moved between the trees. It was brown and covered in thick fur. When it stood up on its back legs, it was taller than 2 humans. Its claws were like long knives, and its teeth were sharp and white. "This is called a grizzly bear," Professor Kethfer said. "It is one of the most powerful land predators on Earth. It can run faster than most vehicles and is strong enough to lift a car." The bear found a fallen tree and lifted it easily with one paw. Under the tree were small animals trying to hide. The bear caught them with its massive claws. The remaining students were now pressed against the walls of the classroom. Valinara had woken up, but was shaking with fear. Crixton was making continuous clicking sounds. Zixtel's crystal body was flashing rapidly between different colors. "The grizzly bear fears nothing," Professor Kethfer continued. "It is the king of its forest. Even other predators avoid it." The hologram showed the bear catching fish from the river. Its movements were fast and precise. Each fish it caught was as big as a small dog, but the bear ate them like snacks. Jake was starting to feel uncomfortable, not because of the animals, but because of how his classmates were reacting. These were just normal animals from his home world. He had grown up knowing about all of them. The hologram changed one more time. Now it showed a swamp with dark water and thick trees. The air looked hot and humid. Logs floated in the water, but some of the logs had eyes. "This is a swamp in the southern region of Earth," the professor said. "The creatures here are ancient. They have not changed for millions of years." One of the logs moved. It was not a log at all, but a huge reptile with a long snout full of teeth. Its skin was like armor, and its eyes were cold and calculating. "This is called an alligator," Professor Kethfer explained. "It is a perfect predator. It can wait without moving for hours, then attack faster than the eye can see." The alligator suddenly exploded from the water. It caught a large bird that was drinking at the water's edge. The bird disappeared into the alligator's massive jaws in less than a second. The last few students were now crying with fear. Some were praying in their native languages. Others were calling for their parents. Jake looked around the classroom. He was the only one who seemed calm. He was starting to understand that his classmates had never seen predators like these before. Their home worlds must be very different from Earth. Professor Kethfer turned off the hologram. "These creatures from Earth represent some of the most efficient killing machines in the known galaxy," he said. "Earth is unusual because it has so many different types of apex predators." The professor looked at his remaining students. "Are there any questions about these Earth predators?" The classroom was silent, except for the sound of frightened breathing. No one wanted to ask questions about such terrible creatures. Then Jake slowly raised his hand. All eyes turned to him. His classmates looked at him with a mixture of fear and respect. They wondered what the human would say about these monsters. From his home world, Professor Kethfer pointed at Jake with one of his 6 arms. "Yes, Jake Martinez. Do you have a question?" Jake looked at the space where the hologram had been showing the grizzly bear. A small smile appeared on his face. What he was about to say would change everything his classmates thought they knew about humans and Earth. "Actually, Professor," Jake said quietly, "I don't have a question. I have a story." Jake stood up slowly from his seat. The classroom was completely quiet. 8 alien students and Professor Kethfer were all staring at him. Their eyes were wide with fear and curiosity. "A story?" Professor Kethfer asked. His translation device made his voice sound confused. "What kind of story?" Jake pointed to the space above them where the hologram had been showing the grizzly bear. "About that one," he said with a small smile. "The grizzly bear." The remaining students looked at each other nervously. Valinara wrapped all 4 of her arms around herself. Crixton's clicking sounds became faster and more worried. Zixtal's crystal body was flashing with dim, frightened colors. "Jake Martinez," Professor Kethfer said carefully, "these creatures are extremely dangerous. Even talking about them can be disturbing for some species." "I know they're dangerous," Jake replied. "That's why this story is interesting." He looked around at his classmates. They were all pressed against the walls, as far from him as possible. They seemed to think that just being near a human who had lived on the same world as these monsters was dangerous. "When I was 8 years old," Jake began, "my family went camping in a place called Yellowstone National Park. It's a big park in the mountains where lots of wild animals live." Professor Kethfor's 4 eyes blinked in a pattern that showed he was confused. "Your family went to a place where apex predators live? For fun?" "Yeah," Jake said, as if this was the most normal thing in the world. "Lots of families do that. We had a small cabin near a lake. It was very peaceful." The alien students exchanged glances. They could not understand why anyone would choose to go to a place full of dangerous animals. "On the second night," Jake continued, "my dad went outside to get more wood for the fireplace. My mom was in the kitchen making dinner. I was in my bedroom reading a book." Jake paused and looked around the room. His classmates were hanging on every word. They looked terrified, but also fascinated. "That's when I heard my mom scream," Jake said. "She yelled, 'Jake, get under the bed right now and don't make any noise.'" Valinara made a soft whistling sound. This was the sound her people made when they were very scared. "What happened next?" she asked in a whisper. "I didn't know what was wrong," Jake said. "But when your mom tells you to hide under the bed, you do it. So I crawled under my bed and waited." The classroom was so quiet that Jake could hear the soft humming of the space station's engines. Everyone was waiting to hear what happened next. "Then I heard heavy footsteps in the hallway," Jake continued. "But they didn't sound like human footsteps. They were too heavy and too slow. And I could hear heavy breathing. Crixton's clicking. Sound stopped completely. When his species stopped clicking, it meant they were too scared to make any noise." "The footsteps came closer to my room," Jake said. "I could hear sniffing sounds, like something was smelling around my door. Then my door opened." "No," Zixtal whispered. Her crystal body was now glowing with pale, frightened light. "The apex predator entered your room?" "Yeah," Jake said simply. "A huge grizzly bear walked into my bedroom. It was even bigger than the one in the hologram. When it stood up, its head almost touched the ceiling." 2 more students quietly left the classroom. They could not handle hearing about someone being so close to such a dangerous creature. "The bear looked around my room," Jake continued. "It knocked over my desk chair with its paw. Books fell on the floor. Then it put its nose down and started sniffing everything." Professor Kethfer was now leaning forward in his seat. "What did?" "You do?" I stayed under the bed and tried not to breathe too loudly, Jake said. The bear kept sniffing around. It smelled my clothes, my books, my toys. Then it walked over to my bed. The remaining students were now barely breathing. They were so scared and fascinated that they could not look away. I could see its huge paws right next to my face, Jake said. Its claws were longer than my fingers. I could hear it breathing above me. It knew I was there. This is impossible, Bellinara whispered. You could not survive being so close to such a predator. The bear put its head down and looked right at me, Jake continued. We stared at each other for what felt like forever. Its eyes were small and dark. I could smell its breath. Crixton fell off his floating seat. He was shaking so much that he could not stay upright. What happened then? He asked from the floor. The bear seemed to decide I wasn't a threat, Jake said. It walked around my room a few more times, then it lay down on my bedroom floor and went to sleep. It went to sleep? Professor Cuthfer asked in shock. The apex predator went to sleep in your room while you were hiding under the bed? Yeah. Jake said, I was stuck under there for about 3 hours. I could hear it breathing and sometimes snoring. A few times it would wake up and sniff around, then go back to sleep. The classroom was completely silent except for the sound of scared breathing. No one could believe what they were hearing. My dad finally came back from getting firewood, Jake continued. He saw that our front door was broken and that there were bear tracks in the house. He started banging pots and pans together and yelling really loud. Your father fought the apex predator? Zixtal asked in amazement. He scared it away, Jake said. The bear woke up, looked annoyed, and walked out of my room. It went through our kitchen, ate some of our food, then left through the back door. The alien students stared at Jake in complete shock. They could not understand how a human family could survive such an encounter. But that's not the end of the story, Jake said. The park rangers came the next morning. They told us that this particular bear was well known. It had broken into cabins before. They said it was just looking for food and probably wasn't going to hurt anyone. Not going to hurt anyone? Velinar asked in disbelief. It was an apex predator. Yeah, but bears don't usually attack humans unless they feel threatened or are protecting their babies, Jake explained. This one was just hungry and curious. Professor. Kethver's translation device made several beeping sounds. He was trying to process what he had heard. Jake Martinez, he said slowly, you are telling us that you survived being in the same room as an apex predator for 3 hours? Yes, Jake said. And your father scared it away with cooking equipment? Yes, and this was considered a normal, if unlucky event. Well, not normal exactly, Jake said. But it happens sometimes. The park rangers said about 20 families each year have bears break into their cabins. The remaining students looked at each other in amazement. They were beginning to understand that humans lived in a world very different from their own. Jake, Professor Kethver said carefully, what you are describing sounds like your species regularly encounters apex predators and survives. I guess so, Jake said. I mean, we try to avoid them, but sometimes you run into them. My neighbor back home keeps a baseball bat by his door because black bears sometimes get into his garbage. Black bears? Crixton asked weakly. They're smaller than grizzly bears, Jake explained, but they can still be dangerous if you're not careful. The alien students were starting to realize something important. If humans regularly encountered these apex predators and survived, what did that say about humans themselves? Jake, Zixtal said quietly, if your people live on the same world as all these predators, and you survive, what does that make humans? Jake paused and thought about the question. He had never really considered it before. I guess it makes us pretty good at staying alive, he said. But as he looked around at his terrified classmates, he began to understand that maybe humans were more than just good at staying alive. Maybe they were something else entirely. Actually, Jake said slowly, I think it makes us predators too. The words hung in the air like a bomb waiting to explode. The alien students stared at Jake with a mixture of fear and fascination. They were beginning to understand that the quiet, friendly human they had been studying with was not what he seemed. He was not prey that had gotten lucky. He was not a weak species that had survived by hiding. He was something much more dangerous. The word predators echoed through the quiet classroom. Jake's alien classmates stared at him with wide eyes. They had never thought of humans as predators before. Humans looked so weak and soft compared to the creatures they had just seen. Professor Cuthbert was the first to speak. Jake Martinez, he said slowly, you are saying that humans are apex predators like the creatures we just studied? I never thought about it that way before, Jake said honestly, but I guess we must be. We're at the top of the food chain on Earth. Valinara shook her head with all four arms. But humans don't have claws or big teeth or armor. How can you be predators? Jake smiled. We don't need claws. We make tools instead. We use our brains? Tools? Crixton asked from where he was still, sitting on the floor. Yeah, like spears and arrows and guns, Jake explained. We figured out how to kill things from far away. We also learned to work together in groups. The alien students looked confused. On their worlds, predators were always big and strong and scary looking. They had never heard of predators that used intelligence and teamwork. Let me tell you about my grandfather, Jake said. He was a farmer in Oklahoma. When he was young, there were wolves that would attack his sheep. Wolves? Zixtal asked nervously. They're like the lions we saw, but they live in colder places. And they're better at working together, Jake explained. A pack of wolves can take down animals much bigger than themselves. Professor Cuthbert leaned forward. What did your grandfather do about these wolves? He and the other farmers got together and hunted them, Jake said simply. They tracked the wolves to their den and killed the whole pack. The alien students gasped. They could not imagine anyone hunting apex predators on purpose. But that's not the interesting part, Jake continued. The interesting part is that humans did this so much that we wiped out wolves from most places where humans lived. We were better predators than they were. You eliminated other apex predators? Professor Cuthbert asked in amazement. Lots of them, Jake said. We killed so many that many species went extinct. We had to make laws to protect the ones that were left. The classroom was silent as the alien students tried to understand this information. On their worlds, apex predators were the most dangerous things imaginable, but humans had apparently eliminated them like they were pests. I have more stories, Jake said. My Uncle Pete lives in Florida. He has an alligator that lives in the pond behind his house. The armored reptile from the swamp? Valinara whispered. Yeah, that one, Jake said. Uncle Pete named it Charlie. Sometimes Charlie sunbathes on Pete's back porch. He lives near. The apex predator? Crixton asked in shock. He says Charlie is actually pretty lazy, Jake explained. As long as Pete doesn't bother Charlie, Charlie doesn't bother Pete. They've been neighbors for about 10 years. The alien students could not believe what they were hearing. A human was casually living next to one of the most dangerous predators they had ever seen. But what if this Charlie decides to attack your uncle? Zixtal asked. Pete keeps a shotgun by his back door, Jake said. If Charlie ever became a problem, Pete would just shoot him. But Charlie seems pretty happy just eating fish and sleeping in the sun. Your uncle would kill the apex predator if necessary? Professor Cuthbert asked. Sure, Jake said. Humans kill alligators all the time. We even eat them. Alligator tail tastes pretty good when you cook it right. Several students made disgusted sounds. The idea of eating apex predators was horrifying to them. "Let me tell you about my friend Danny," Jake continued. "He lives in Alaska. His job is to protect tourists from bears." "How does he do that?" Valinara asked. "He carries a big gun, and he knows how bears think," Jake explained. "If a bear gets too close to people, Danny scares it away. If it won't leave, he shoots it. One human can drive away multiple apex predators?" Crixton asked in amazement. "Danny is really good at his job," Jake said. "He's been doing it for 15 years, and he's never lost a tourist. He says the key is to understand that bears are just big animals looking for food. They're not monsters." The alien students were starting to see a pattern. Humans did not seem to be afraid of apex predators. Instead, they treated them like problems to be solved. "What about the ocean predators?" Zixtal asked. "The sharks with all the teeth?" "Oh, we hunt those too," Jake said. "My cousin Rick is a fisherman. He catches sharks for a living. He says the big ones are hard to reel in, but the meat sells for good money." "Humans hunt the ocean apex predators for food?" Professor Kethfer asked in shock. "Shark fin soup is considered a delicacy in some places," Jake explained. "Though personally, I think it's overrated. Shark meat is kind of tough." The alien students were beginning to understand something that terrified them. Humans were not just surviving alongside apex predators. They were hunting them, eating them, and treating them like they were just another kind of animal. "I'm starting to get a picture here," Professor Kethfer said slowly. "Humans are the apex predators on Earth." "I guess so," Jake said, "though we don't usually think of ourselves that way. We just think of ourselves as people." "But you eliminate other predators," the professor continued. "You hunt them for food. You drive them away from places where you want to live." "Well, yeah," Jake said. "That's what intelligent species do, right? We change our environment to suit our needs." The alien students exchanged glances. None of their species had ever done anything like this. They had all evolved on worlds where they were prey animals or peaceful herbivores. The idea of actively hunting apex predators was completely foreign to them. "Jake," Velinara said quietly, "what is the most dangerous predator on Earth?" Jake thought for a moment. "Probably humans," he said finally. "We're the only species that can kill everything else." "But what about the bears and sharks and lions?" Crixton asked. "They're dangerous to individual humans," Jake explained. "But they're not dangerous to humans as a species. We have weapons and technology. We can coordinate attacks with thousands of people. We can track them with satellites and hunt them with helicopters." "Helicopters?" Zixtal asked. "Flying machines," Jake said. "We can attack from the air where ground predators can't reach us." The alien students were quiet for a long moment. They were beginning to understand that humans were not the weak, harmless species they had thought. "Jake," Professor Kethfer said carefully, "are you telling us that humans are the apex predator of apex predators?" "I never thought about it that way," Jake said, "but I guess that's accurate. We're the only species on Earth that doesn't have to worry about being hunted by something else." "Even the largest and most dangerous creatures?" the professor asked. "Even those," Jake confirmed. "Actually, especially those. The bigger and more dangerous something is, the more likely humans are to see it as a challenge." The alien students looked at each other with growing alarm. A species that saw apex predators as challenges rather than threats was something they had never imagined. "My dad told me about his grandfather, who lived a long time ago," Jake continued. "Back then, humans used to hunt really big animals just to prove they were brave. They would go after elephants and rhinos and big cats with just simple weapons." "They hunted for sport?" Professor Kethfer asked in amazement. "Sometimes," Jake said, though usually they also needed the food and materials. But yeah, there was definitely an element of proving yourself by taking down something dangerous. Velinara was shaking now. Your species actively seeks out dangerous predators to fight them? Not all of us, Jake said. But some humans love danger. They climb the highest mountains, dive to the bottom of the ocean, and explore places where dangerous animals live. The more dangerous it is, the more some humans want to do it. This explains so much, Professor Kethver said quietly. Human. Explorers are famous throughout the galaxy for going to dangerous places that other species avoid. Really? Jake asked with interest. Oh yes, the professor said. When the Galactic Council needs someone to explore a death world or investigate a dangerous phenomenon, they always ask for human volunteers. We always wondered why humans seemed so fearless. I guess we're just used to danger, Jake said. Earth is a pretty dangerous place, so we learned to deal with it. Crixton slowly stood up and got back onto his floating seat. Jake, he said, carefully, what do humans do when they encounter a predator that they cannot defeat? Jake thought about this question. We figure out a way to defeat it anyway, he said finally. Humans are really good at solving problems. If one approach doesn't work, we try something else. Give us an example, Zixtal requested. Well, there used to be these really big sharks called megalodons, Jake said. They were much bigger than the great whites we saw in the hologram. Some were as long as a spaceship. What happened to them? Professor Kethver asked. They went extinct before humans were advanced enough to hunt them, Jake explained. But if they were still around today, we would probably figure out how to hunt them too. Maybe with submarines or underwater explosives. The alien students were horrified. Humans were not just apex predators. They were apex predators who never gave up. There's something else too, Jake said thoughtfully. Humans don't just hunt dangerous animals. We also domesticate them. Domesticate? Velinara asked. We take wild animals and train them to live with us and work for us, Jake explained. We turned wolf. 3 weeks passed after Jake's revelation about humans being apex predators. The news had spread throughout the Galactic Academy like wildfire. Students from other classes came to stare at Jake in the hallways. Some were curious, others were frightened, and a few seemed excited to meet a real apex predator. Jake found the attention strange. He was still the same person he had always been. He liked reading books, playing video games, and eating pizza. He did not feel like a dangerous predator. But he was starting to understand that other species saw him very differently now. The xenobiology class had grown in an unexpected way. Instead of students dropping out, new ones kept joining. Word had spread that Professor Kethver's class had a real human who could tell stories about Earth's apex predators. The classroom had to be moved to a bigger room to fit everyone. Jake now sat in the front row instead of the back. Professor Kethver had asked him to be closer so that everyone could hear his stories better. Jake was not sure he liked being the center of attention, but he tried to be helpful. Today's class was different. Professor Kethver had announced that they would be studying defensive strategies that different species used to survive on dangerous worlds. Throughout the galaxy, Professor Kethver began, species have developed many ways to avoid being eaten by apex predators. Some hide underground. Others live in trees or in the water. Some develop armor or poison, or the ability to run very fast. The hologram showed various alien species and their survival strategies. There were creatures that could change color to blend in with their surroundings. Others had thick shells that protected them from attacks. Some could fly away from danger, while others lived in large groups for protection. Each species finds a way to survive in their environment, the professor continued. The key is to avoid confrontation with apex predators whenever possible. A new student, A small furry creature named Piptau raised her tiny paw. Professor, what survival strategy did humans develop? Professor Cuthbert's 4 eyes turned to look at Jake. Perhaps our human student can answer that question. Jake thought carefully about the question. What survival strategy had humans developed? I guess we developed intelligence, he said finally. We learned to make tools and work together. But that is an offensive strategy, not a defensive one, pointed out Velinara, who had become much more comfortable talking to Jake over the past few weeks. You did not learn to hide or run away. You learned to fight back. That's true, Jake admitted. Humans don't really have a defensive strategy. When we encounter something dangerous, we usually try to figure out how to defeat it. A student from the water world of Aquarius Prime raised a fin-like appendage. But what if the predator is too big or too strong to defeat? Then we come back with better weapons or more people, Jake said. Humans don't really give up. The alien students exchanged glances. They were still getting used to the idea that some species responded to danger by attacking rather than fleeing. Professor Cathfor activated a new hologram. Let me show you something interesting, he said. This is footage from various worlds where humans have established colonies. The hologram showed a jungle planet with thick vegetation and dangerous-looking creatures. Human colonists were cutting down trees and building settlements. When a large predator approached, the humans did not run away. Instead, they formed a group with weapons and drove the creature off. This is Colony World Gamma 7, Professor Cuthbert explained. The local predators are called razorback saurians. They are 2 meters tall, with claws like swords. Most species would consider this world uninhabitable. The hologram showed the razorback saurians. They looked like giant lizards with armor plating and vicious claws. They moved in packs and seemed to fear nothing. How did the humans deal with these apex predators? Asked Crixton. Watch and see, Professor Cuthbert said. The hologram showed human colonists setting up motion sensors around their settlement. When the razorbacks approached, alarms sounded and humans came out with weapons. They did not try to kill all the creatures, but they made it clear that the settlement was off limits. The humans established dominance over the territory, Professor Cuthbert explained. The razorbacks learned to avoid the human settlement. Both species now coexist peacefully. The apex predators learned to fear the humans? Asked Zixtel in amazement. It appears so, the professor said. This pattern has been observed on several human colony worlds. Local predators quickly learn that humans are not prey. Jake watched the footage with interest. He had never thought about human colonization this way before. I guess we do kind of claim territory like other predators do, he said. Very much so, Professor Cuthbert agreed. But there is something else interesting about human behavior. The hologram changed to show a different world. This one was covered in ice and snow. Humans in thick coats were building structures and vehicles designed for the cold climate. This is Colony World Delta 12, the professor said. The apex predator. Here is called the ice stalker. It is a creature perfectly adapted for hunting in blizzards. The hologram showed a white, cat-like creature that was nearly invisible against the snow. It was about the size of a tiger, but moved with complete silence. Its eyes glowed blue in the darkness. The ice stalker is one of the most effective ambush predators ever discovered, Professor Cuthbert explained. It can track prey for days without being detected. Several students shivered, even though the classroom was warm. The ice stalker looked like the stuff of nightmares. How did the humans deal with this predator? Asked Piptol nervously. They did something unexpected, Professor Cuthbert said. Watch. The hologram showed human colonists working outside their settlement. Ice stalkers were watching them from hiding places in the snow. But instead of attacking the predators or driving them away, The humans seem to be ignoring them. I don't understand, said Velinara. Why are the humans not defending themselves? Keep watching, the professor said. The hologram showed a human colonist named Ben walking to a supply shed. An ice stalker was following him, clearly preparing to attack. But then Ben stopped and turned around. I know you're there, buddy, Ben said calmly to the ice stalker, but I'm not food. I'm a human. You don't want to mess with me. The ice stalker stopped and tilted its head as if it was confused. Ben continued walking to the shed, completely ignoring the predator. The ice stalker watched him for a moment, then disappeared back into the snow. The human showed no fear, Professor Kethver explained. The ice stalker could sense that this was not normal prey behavior. It decided not to attack. The apex predator was confused by human confidence? Asked Crixton. Exactly, the professor said. Predators expect prey to show fear. When humans show no fear, it confuses the predator's hunting instincts. Jake nodded. That makes sense. Most animals can smell fear. If you're not afraid, they don't know what to do with you. But what if the predator attacks anyway? Asked a student from the back of the room. Then the humans fight back, Jake said simply, and usually win. The hologram changed again to show humans and ice stalkers living near each other. The predators had learned to avoid the humans, but they were not afraid of them either. It was more like mutual respect. This is the current situation on Delta 12, Professor Kethver said. Humans and ice stalkers coexist peacefully. The predators hunt their normal prey, and the humans leave them alone as long as they don't threaten the colony. The humans made peace with apex predators? Asked Zixtal in amazement. It's not exactly peace, Jake said. It's more like an understanding. We respect their territory, and they respect ours. Professor Kethver turned off the hologram and looked around the classroom. This brings us to an important point about human behavior. Humans are apex predators, but they are also capable of cooperation and restraint. What do you mean? Asked Pipdel. Most apex predators kill everything they can, the professor explained. They eliminate all competition and eat all available prey. But humans seem to understand the value of balance. We learned that lesson the hard way, Jake said. When we killed too many predators on Earth, it caused problems for the whole ecosystem. So we learned to be more careful. This is what makes humans unique in the galaxy, Professor Kethver continued. You are apex predators with the wisdom to control your predatory instincts. The alien students sat quietly, thinking about this idea. A species that was powerful enough to dominate any ecosystem, but wise enough to choose not to do so was something they had never imagined. Professor, asked Velinara, what does this mean for the rest of us, now that humans are exploring the galaxy? Professor Kethver looked at Jake, then back at the class. I believe it means we are safer, not less safe. How can apex predators make us safer? Asked Crixton in confusion. Because humans seem to protect the species they consider friends, the professor explained. Just as they protect ecosystems on their colony worlds, they appear to protect their allies in space. Jake smiled. We don't like bullies, he said. If someone is picking on our friends, we tend to do something about it. So humans are apex predators who protect non-predators? Asked Zixtal. I guess so, Jake said, though we prefer to think of ourselves as just good neighbors. Professor Kethver nodded approvingly. The Galactic Council has noticed this pattern. Human ships oft.